My name is Hlumani Ndlovu. I am a senior lecturer at the University of Cape Town in the Faculty of Health Sciences. And basically my position is what I do is I teach medical biochemistry to first year medical students. I also do research in my own lab where I train and supervise postgraduate students. Biochemistry as a field, basically what we're trying to do is we're looking at the chemistry of life. So here we're talking about biomolecules, like for instance, if you think about metabolism, you eat food and then from that food your body is able to produce energy. You can look at it from the metabolism point of view, but also you can look at it from the disease point of view, which is what is medical biochemistry. To say that when these processes that are happening every second in our body, when they start to malfunction, what happens, right? Or when you have an infection with a virus, like for instance now we have COVID-19, which is a big problem. So when you have this virus, what happens to these molecules in our body that are supposed to help us to function and help us to deal with these infections. So this is medical biochemistry. So my expertise are in immunology, which is basically the study of the immune system. So we're looking at how the body responds to infections, whether it's tuberculosis, TB, HIV. I did my PhD specifically looking at parasites, worms. That basically, we get this infection and these worms cause a huge problem in our livers. So we're trying to understand how the immune system plays a role in trying to deal with this infection with these parasites. But I also did my master's and my undergraduate degree in biochemistry and molecular biology. And I've already explained what is biochemistry, which is just the chemistry of life. And the molecular biology is basically looking now at molecular level, in terms of gene expression. And genes basically, you get the genes coming from the DNA, so they're encoded in our chromosomes, which is basically where we store all our genetic information. So I grew up in a rural village, actually, in the area called Malala. So this village is 30 kilometers outside of Pietermaritzburg in KwaZulu-Natal. My responsibilities at home is we had cattle, so we had to go after school every day. You go and you fetch the cattle from the fields. Well, you go and look for them, actually, because they could be anywhere, and that walk could take half an hour to a couple of hours on a bad day. Although you're spending so much time in nature, but I never really had an inclination of following such career path, just because in terms of what you see around you is that the most that you see is you're seeing a policeman, a teacher, and a doctor, because you go to a doctor when you're sick. I did my primary at Siwelile Primary School, which was almost 10 kilometers away from home. This is me at 5, 6 years old going into, primary school, and you have to walk 10 kilometers. It was a lot. But also in Maritzburg, in winter, it gets cold in the morning. So you're walking and it's just like white, because of the frost overnight. And you have to walk, these 10 kilometers. This used to be very, very difficult. But then you learn, you have to go to school, so you have to just do it. And then from there, after I finished my primary school, and then I went to a local high school again, Banda High School, which is where I finished my matric in 2002. Now, I think for me, I've really, now when I reflect, I've really been lucky in the sense that, because when I was in primary, actually in the first grade, in June, I failed. And I remember going back home, with this report and gave it to my parents. And, everyone, your siblings and your cousins are just laughing at you. And it bothered me big time. Guys were just laughing at me because I had failed, a grade in the middle of the year. So I didn't like that. So I think when I look back now and I'm older, I'm like, I think this is the first instance where I just felt like I don't like failure. And I have to work hard so that I avoid having to have this feeling again. And then when I went to the second grade, I was also struggling with maths. And I was lucky that there was a teacher who took interest in me at the time. who then, will invite me to her house over the weekend. And, she will help me alongside with her kids in terms of learning the maths. And after the grade, second grade onwards, I was in love with maths, and I did so well in school in general. Like, I was top of my class from like the third grade until I finished matric. And it all comes from just having, caring adults, teachers, who, just see something in you and want to grow and nurture that potential that they see in you. And, then you start to believe that, you could really be coming from anywhere, right? Because, I come from a village, but now I am, in a position where I can take my life anywhere, right? And now I'm privileged that I'm sitting in spaces where I'm able to educate the next generation of medical practitioners. I'm able to educate the next generation of scientists who are going to go out in the world and solve some of these problems. But then if we were to look in my life back then, we didn't think it was possible because of the background, because of the situation at home, for a number of reasons, right? But then if, as a person, you have that belief and you have the discipline and you are able to put in the work, you are able to overcome these challenges. What I do on a daily basis is I need to think of ideas that I want to pursue and investigate in the lab. So for me to be able to do that, I need to read as much as I can so that I know what has been done by other people, so that I don't repeat what has been done. So on a daily basis, basically, what I do in the main is to read. I read so that I can have ideas I can bounce with my students, and then they can go in the lab and then they can do the experiments. But also I read to prepare for my lectures because I need to also still go and teach. And good teachers are well prepared. The lab work, at least the kind of lab work that we do, because we're working with microorganisms and some of them are infectious. So we need to work in contained environments. So what you call your biosafety level 2 and biosafety level 3 if you're working with Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which is a bacteria that causes TB. So then you need to work in these safe spaces, and then also you need to wear your protective personal equipment. But the work itself is exciting because you start to really with a question, what happens to these cells that when we infect them with this bacteria, let's say it's Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and we treat them with this drug, how do they respond to that, right? And then we can have a readout, right, of the kind of response we're expecting to see, right? So the readout could be that the cells are dying or the cells are not dying, right? And then you can see that in a microscope, and you can count the cells under the microscope, and then you can see that the cells were treated compared to those that were untreated and infected. There was a change in behavior. And that is exciting to us and to students, because at first you had these cells, then you did an infection, then you did a treatment with the drugs, and then you saw an effect, right? So at the end of the day, you have an output, which you can then put in a graph, you can put in as a nice picture, and then you can see, and that is exciting. It's an outcome. It's a collaborative effort. You have multiple scientists who come together working on the same project. For instance, with the worms project, so a lot of the work we were doing there was in animal models, right? So using mice as a model. So there is you get the people who take care of the animals, right? So you have the veterinary nurse, we have the veterinarian who basically make sure that the welfare of the animals is on point, and that there are no ethical violations when it comes to that kind of work. And then from there is when we do get good data and something that we want to pursue further and want to understand in a more complex animal beside the mouse. Then we go into non-primate research. Ultimately, when you're going to have a solution to a problem, all the stakeholders need to come into play. So from the guys who are dealing with the water systems, like for instance, like the farmer who came to us and say, I think I have a solution to this problem, than to us who are in the lab and trying to basically deal with the scientific detail. And then on the other side, then you have the pharmaceutical companies who then need to come in to produce the vaccine, because we may do the immunology and understanding of the biology, but then the development of the vaccine and the testing then is driven by the pharmaceutical industry, who then later can come back to us and say, okay, fine, now we need to do the clinical trial, and then they now need to get the medical professionals to then come and do the clinical trial. So it basically is an entire ecosystem developing different stakeholders who participate in making sure that we are able to get these scientific advances to solve these critical problems in our communities. I work a lot also with clinicians, because also what we try to do is they come to us and say, in our clinics we have these problems. Like, for instance, a good example is a project I'm doing on antiretroviral drugs induced liver injury. So in South Africa and in Africa we have a big problem of HIV, and people are taking now these ARVs as treatment. But then some of these people, they develop these adverse reactions to the therapy itself. And this is a problem because, of course, if someone is taking a drug and they're developing this adverse effect, they can then stop taking the treatment, which is what you don't want in the case of HIV. Right? So now we are trying to understand at a molecular level, trying to understand the biochemistry, because again, the drugs, they get absorbed in the gut, they go into the liver where then they get processed. So we are then trying to understand what happens in the liver. So then we can then tell these guys how then to deal with this problem, to manage these patients who have these adverse reactions. So there's always a collaborative project between the scientists who are doing the lab work, and the clinicians who are seeing the patients. And our aim with the NGO was to inspire and motivate high school learners to use education as a tool to basically advance their lives. So we go to high schools and we speak to matric students, grade 9, grade 10s, grade 11s, and just trying to inspire them, right? Because what we recognized was that there's a lot of people who go to villages and internships and they tutor, so they do content. But it's like you cannot work on ground that is unprepared. This is basic agriculture. 101 is before you plant, you have to prepare the soil. And this is what really we try to do, is if we can get to the mind and we can change how a person sees themselves, right? We can inspire them, then it's easier for them to learn because their mind is keyed to learning, right? It's now ready to consume that information. And this is what we're doing. We publish a book, we give it for free actually to high school learners when we do our workshops. It's Discover Everyday Heroes, Stories of Success. The book is available on Take a Lot. But then we don't realize actually, even in those dark corners where we come from, we do have resources that you can tap into, right? So look beyond just your own box of your own misery, but then look outside and say, where I am, who can I talk to, who can assist me to move forward? And this could be your teachers. This could be, someone in the community who's influential, like your counselor. And I think every, village has a ward counselor. And this person usually has information because they have access to the municipal offices. So they can get you like bursary forms, they can get you access to the internet and all those things. So go to these people and talk to them. And say, this is where I want to go, how can you help me? And this is really you taking advantage of these little resources that are available to you so that you are able to push yourself forward. And the last thing is just patience. I think now we're living in an age where we want to have this instant gratification, and it does not always work. And with education, it's almost a long-term mindset, right? Is you basically investing today so that tomorrow you can reap the benefit. And if you want to rush that process, you're not going to have the desired outcomes. So work hard, dedicate yourself to your work, and go out there and seek help and assistance from those who have walked the path. And I can assure you that you'll be successful.